Jason West.
Welcome into this episode of Bare Bones. My name is Mason West, as always. And today I have a special guest, Quinten Q at Buckus Stats. You know him. He's popped on here a couple times. Friend of the pod. Q, how you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I am reeling for real football, and just like every time of year I just start to get antsy around this time, around like when preseason starts, because I'm like, it's football, but it's not football.
Yeah.
And I just like I've hit a point where I stop paying too close attention to it, because I'm like, I'll drive myself insane if I pay too close attention to it.
It's such a fine line that I try to play with this because, like you said, football's football, and I'm just happy that we have football.
Mm-hmm.
And you want to get little snippets, and we're basically going to do that, right? We're going to go through the potential final 53. We're trying to pull from training camp reports and what we've seen. And I know you do a deep dive on, statistically and stuff, but then also what we see in these preseason games. And then there's the other voice inside your head that's like, preseason doesn't matter, but it has to matter. So you're trying to tread that line between the two.
Yeah, it's always a fine line to, like, I feel like the things that always get talked about in preseason and training camp and all this isn't the stuff that matters that much. Like, do I really care that Keenan Allen is 220 pounds? I have no idea how much he weighed last year. Like, I don't really care, but the stuff that does matter more is, updates about Daniel Hardy, updates about, Bill Murray was flashing really early all camp. I hadn't heard much about him since then. I don't like, what do I think about that? I feel like that's the stuff that really matters from these preseason times and camp, more than the guys who are known commodities on the roster.
And so I guess for you, like, what has been some of your bigger thoughts, impressions leading through the first couple of weeks of training camp, first two preseason games, now going into the games tonight against the Chiefs, the quest for 4-0?
I mean, to me, the biggest question through all of this is, how real is Austin Booker? How real is the production we've seen from him? Because a lot of it has come against the backups and in the, second half of games and stuff, but it's massive, the numbers that he's put up. So that's one of the biggest questions. One of the biggest takeaways I have is he might have been a really quality draft pick. And I thought he might've been before, but it's just like, it's starting to get that ticker is moving closer and closer to being like, he was a really good draft pick, but we just need to see it in the regular season. So that's the number one thing that I've come away with the preseason thinking. Outside of that, it's been, the O-line has been a constant question for this team for a few years now. And we're coming out with a healthy Tevin Jenkins, a healthy Braxton Jones, it seems like Darnell Wright's playing pretty well. I know there were some injury reports earlier in camp, but I mean, it's hard to see it on tape, really, from what I've seen in preseason. And then Nate Davis, who knows how healthy he is.
Right.
But with the center kind of getting set now, with Coleman Shelton being the guy over Ryan Bates, I think there's value to that, especially since Coleman Shelton's a left-handed center.
Yes.
And Ryan Bates is right-handed. Like, I really didn't want to see that transition during the year, right? Like, Nate Davis or Tevin Jenkins goes down, Ryan Bates is kicking over to left guard or right guard, whichever one it is, and you have a new center who snaps with a different hand now and probably has a different technique in the way he does stuff. Just the chemistry isn't the same with the quarterback. I really did not want that to happen. The second they signed Coleman Shelton, I was hoping he would be the starting center, and that's what we're getting. So I'm happy about that.
Yeah, I know you did the best you could to kind of do a dive on Ryan Bates in terms of him playing center. I remember a couple weeks ago, whatever that was now. And he really didn't have a lot of snaps at center.
No.
So there's really not much you can pull from that. I do wish it was a little bit more of an actual competition. It just kind of seemed like, unfortunately, with Nate Davis not being there, you were rolling with Coleman at center and Bates at guard. And then Bates got hurt, and it kind of sealed the deal. But like you said, that's probably for the best, considering Coleman Shelton has a lot more just time on task at center. I think PFF had him graded out somewhere in the 20s, something of that nature in terms of center play, but that's not 32. I mean, when you look at
about right. I mean, there were I want to say it was 2 or 3 years ago. Like PFF had Sam Mustipher ranked as the 20th best center, and I didn't buy it. With Colton Shelton, I've watched his tape. I buy that. There are I felt like, or here's actually the way I'd put it. With Mustipher, he might have been the 20th best center at absolutely every aspect of playing center. Whereas Coleman Shelton is probably a top 10 center in certain aspects when it comes to mobility in space and ability to hit blocks out in space, hit the second level, get out on poles. But in his ability to handle power, he might be 40th, So like there's more variation there. And I think there are things that he does that you can build game plans around because he's very skilled at certain things. And I'm not sure Mustipher had that going for him. So maybe that was kind of more what was at play there.
I think that's a really good point that a lot of people don't take into consideration when you look at these grades, that it's a culmination, right? And exactly, you may average out into that 20, but the variance on a guy like a Mustipher or even like a Lucas Patrick just was so wide. But Shelton's got a little more of that flat line of this is just kind of where he is across the board and in some more important areas. I know for me, something that you didn't necessarily mention was that I've liked to see, and I think that I needed was to see how that offense was going to work in terms of how you rolled out receivers versus tight ends. We obviously knew Shane Waldron, very heavy tight end usage, but I always thought that was because of who he had at his disposal in terms of DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, and then the question mark for him that was Jackson Smith-Njigba. But you have some more known commodities when it comes to receiver and also at tight end here. So seeing that, yes, you still had a mix of those 12 versus 13 personnel versus, some empty looks and things of that nature. I liked the split we had. Obviously, I wish it was a little better output in that last game. We had the 3 and outs. And I'm torn in terms of what to think right now about, a Keenan Allen, because you look in the game, you watch on that film and you're like, were you running as hard as you could on some of those routes? Or was this like, look, it's preseason, I don't really care. Then you see highlights that came out during Hard Knocks or what the Bears are putting out, and Keenan is burning some of the Bears DBs who are very good. So where does he fall? Like, is his juice still there? I didn't get that question answered in preseason, unfortunately. But so hopefully moving forward we do. And then just in terms of on the defensive side, while yes, I'm really excited to see what Austin Booker ultimately is going to do, and that defensive line question is really one of the biggest ones that we have there. I was also looking what's happening with the DBs, because unfortunately, right, we know Jalen Johnson has missed time here and there. We know that Jaquan Brisker has missed time. So what is the depth there, right? Elijah Hicks surprised me in a positive way so far this preseason. He hasn't looked like a detriment like he has when he got time previously. I've liked what I've seen out of some backup DBs getting hands on balls and coverage. So, that is nice to see when it comes to some of that depth as well.
Yeah, I think the safety room specifically is one of the most interesting aspects of building this 53. I had a really hard time with a few of the names on here of saying like, nah, they don't need him on this roster.
Speaking of that 53, let's roll into it. But first, we're going to take a quick break here. And after that, we'll talk about the offensive side. All right, 53-man roster predictions. Offense first. So the first category we have here, I did it based off of that lovely sheet you provided for SQ, and I'll show at the very end because I loved using it. It just made it very easy.
That's the goal, man. Make it easy.
Make it easy. Let's do quarterback first. Pretty straightforward, I think, for us, right? I mean, we both had Caleb Williams and Tyson Bagent making this team. Austin Reed and Brett Rippon ultimately not.
Yeah, I mean, there were a few sources out there who've already put out articles about like their predictions, and I think one of them had them keeping Rippon, and like this is the most talented Bears roster we've had in a while. I don't really know why you would take away a roster spot from a guy who might be on the bubble of this roster to give it to the third string quarterback. Personally, I mean, as much as I think Brett Rippon's shown something through the preseason, I just don't know why you would take a roster spot away from a Brendan Bates or another guy who's just on the bubble like Daniel Hardy. I just think they can offer more.
Yeah, ultimately at the end of the day, right, you have to keep in mind that if someone's would have to sign Rippon to a deal and bring them on their 53. Is that possible? Yes, but I'm not as worried about that someone doing that, because it's not just about, especially a quarterback, the quality of the player, but also knowledge of the offense. I recently heard a interview with Kirk Cousins where he was talking about the differences of playing, with the Vikings with Kevin O'Connell, and then playing now with the Falcons and their new offensive coordinator, who is from the same tree. But he was saying that there is still difficulty there because, verbiage and, still the play calls are different. And so it doesn't matter if it's the same tree or anything like that. It's still very different. You hear that consistently year in, year out when it comes to these different offenses, even if it's still off of that, McVay system. Same thing. If you're going to bring in a Brett Rippon, you're probably cutting your second string quarterback who knows your system because he spent all summer with you. And heaven forbid for that team, if your starter goes down week 1 and now you're depending on Brett Rippon to cram everything in that short period of time, I don't see that happening. So I also think you could get him, or definitely Austin Reed, you can get to the practice squad if you want him there.
Yeah.
I think you can get Brett Rippon in the practice squad, and how they've changed the rules of that third emergency quarterback. You can have him inactive on game day, bring him up, all that jazz. I'm not super concerned about that point. And then worst case scenario, I mean, if you're at a point where you've lost Caleb Williams, you've lost Tyson Bagent, and you're now depending on, in this scenario, Austin Reed, I don't think it doesn't matter anymore. You're having a totally different conversation.
The average NFL team at that point is relying on Craig Krenzel anyways. So yeah. Craig Krenzel it up,
Exactly. So yeah, we're locked in here. Next, we have the wide receiver room. We have a little bit of a difference here. There's a couple of ways we all could have gone. There's the obvious ones: DJ Moore, Rome Odunze, Keenan Allen, Tyler Scott. On the form you had, you put Velus Jones as a running back. I decided mentally to put him at wide receiver. I don't think it really matters. I don't know if you do, because at the end of the day, it's kind of like weapon, and you just, I think, slide him to whatever makes your depth chart work.
Yeah, I think he is one of the parts of this roster that makes everything a little more fluid with the way that you can construct the offensive roster. Like I only have 5 wide receivers.
Yeah.
If Velus is a running back, because I'm saying, well, Velus can play wide receiver. Gerald Everett can play some outside snaps. I can gain another body someplace else because I have those 2 guys who are more flexible.
Absolutely. And that's where some people are getting this twisted at, where they're locking in, attenuating on the fact that he's getting so many snaps at running back. And it's like, well, yes, because he's gotten a lot of snaps already in the NFL at wide receiver, and he doesn't need that practice, but that doesn't mean that he's not going to get rolled out there week 1 in a 4 wide receiver set as a receiver. Get the snaps at running back, and like you said, it's just Swiss Army knife, moving around wherever makes it fit. The other spot we ended up differing here was, so like wide receiver, I kept Nasimba Webster and you kept Dante Pettis. I think I know why you did, but I'd love to hear what your thoughts are on that.
My thought is, need someone who can catch punts. Like Rome Odunze looks to be the punt returner, I guess, but you need someone else out there. God forbid Rome gets hurt or gets a little banged up doing something else as a receiver. And they're like, well, we don't want to risk that on punt return now. You need someone who can go do that. And Dante Pettis, Nasimba Webster, and DeAndre Carter is an option here too. But one of those 3 are the guy that you need to keep for that. And to me, when I'm looking at Nasimba Webster, he's had if he was going to be more than just a designated punt returner, I think we would have seen it by now. And I think Pettis can offer you at least a little bit if you get 2 injuries in that room, where he's a professional wide receiver. He's proven that he can play, even if it's not at a high level. And that's why I went with Pettis there. Webster probably offers more on special teams overall, though. So it's kind of a toss-up for me.
And that's why I ended up going with Webster in this spot, because you can only go do so much when it comes to snap counts. But in that last game, he had 29 snaps, 57% in offense. He had 8 snaps, 35% on special teams. Versus, yes, Pettis had some flash, obviously, when it came to touchdowns that he scored. They're decent routes against the 2s and 3s. We're going to keep that in mind. In the past, when I've seen him play like actual professional wide receiver up for the Bears, it hasn't been great. And like you said, he's pretty limited. It's pretty much, hey, go out there and not even like return the punt. It's kind of just catch it and just stand there with it for the most part. So I don't want to have to bank on him being the returner. I don't know. I'm curious what your perspective is on having Rome Odunze be the the punt return. I'm fine with it. I mean, DJ Moore returned punts and kicks in his rookie year. I mean, do we forget Deshaun Jackson was a punt returner? So, number one receivers have been returners, guys who eventually were number ones, but, rookie year, especially when you're technically probably wide receiver 3, depending on how you want to stack these guys, you want to get the ball in dynamic players' hands, and this is a way to do that. So, I mean, I'm fine with him being a punt returner, but also that's why I felt I didn't need a Dante Pettis to catch it. You could, in that scenario.
If I were Matt Eberflus or Shane Waldron or whoever's having the say in this, or maybe the wide receivers coach, I'm going to the special teams coordinator, and I'm asking, is this guy going to get lit up? Does he know what he's doing? As long as the answer is not going to get lit up, he knows what he's doing, he's actually really good at it, then I'm fine with it. If the answer is, well, maybe, as long as he gets better at this, he'll be okay, I'm out. Like, I don't want him doing it. And it's impossible for me or you to know that, but like that's what a lot of this stuff is. And there's the human element of like, what's their experience doing it? What's their natural ability doing it? Like, is he really that comfortable with eyes up, eyes down, eyes up, eyes down, eyes up, catch it? Okay, there's no one right in front of me. Like, consistently doing that, as long as he feels good with it and is going to consistently do that well, I'm fine with that. I just don't want him getting his head knocked off because he didn't fair catch it.
Yeah, absolutely. Right now, another area that we differed was running back, fullback kind of combo here. We have DeAndre Swift, same. Khalil Herbert, same. Roschon Johnson, same. This is where you put Bayless in there, more or less saying he's making the team. That's kind of erroneous. I slid in, and I'm not going to lie, I'll admit this is a Homer, I want this to happen versus I think this is going to happen situation where I kept Ian Wheeler on the roster as a running back. We both kept Kyrie Blasingame. We'll touch on that in a second. I was surprised when I looked at yours that I saw not necessarily that you didn't keep Ian Wheeler, but that you, in this scenario, cut Homer, because I figured it was kind of one of those two would stick. So why did you end up cutting Homer?
I don't see a need for 4 running backs on the team, like plus the fullback, so 5 total. Like, you're just talking about a lot of running backs at this point. And truly, I wanted to keep Ian Wheeler. I wanted to keep Ian Wheeler and not keep Dante Pettis.
Mm-hmm.
Like, but then I only have 4 receivers, 5 if you include Bayless, and that felt light. So I was like, okay, I need another receiver. And that's where this is a really crowded running back room, a crowded competition for it. I just don't know what Homer brings to this team at this point outside of just some special teams ability. But I feel like you have quite a few special teams guys on this roster. So at that point, I just don't know what Homer's role is here.
I know people keep talking about how, Shane Waldron might love him, or even going as far as saying that he does because of the time that they were there in Seattle. I mean, it's not like Shane brought him in. Homer was already here. So yes, he might really enjoy him. In this last game, he played 17 snaps, 33% on offense, 6 snaps, 26% on special teams. He's kind of the, third down guy, pass blocker, which we know guys like Khalil Herbert struggle with. Roschon's pretty good at it. This is just me making my guy fit here. What was that?
And Swift can be your third down guy. Like, yeah. Swift is a good receiver out of the backfield. He's capable in pass protection. Like, I think they have 2 guys who are capable of that.
And again, I fully admit I'm shoving a guy that I just really like onto this team. The way that I'm making it work in my brain is I think I can get a lot of special teams usage out of an Ian Wheeler for multiple reasons. One, I can switch it up and do different returns because I can have Wheeler and Bayless back there. I don't know why they were messing with, I don't know if they're hiding some of these guys, but like why Tyler Scott is returning some of these kicks and stuff. Like, it just seems like they're not really using the real returners right now for these kick returns. But I think also body-wise, and this is interesting, we'll touch on this in some future categories, but Ian Wheeler could be a body that makes sense to be a blocker on kick return, right? And that is a benefit over a guy like a Dante Pettis, like you mentioned too. He has the speed where he could be, useful on punt return. He could be useful on, punt coverage, depending on where you want to put him at. So I thought I could slide him in there. When it comes to Kyrie Blasingame, I'm curious. So he played last game, 6 snaps, 12% on offense, and then 7 snaps, 30% on special teams. Do you see him having a hefty role in this offense, especially with what we've seen so far from Shane Waldron what he's done in the past when he was in Seattle, is he potentially a cut here, or is it like, hey, you need a fullback?
I think he's on this roster. I had him as pretty much a lock, if not like when I first categorized this, I did lock, probable, bubble, or unlikely. Were my first that was my first wave of it, and I think I had him. Actually, let me see here. Yeah, I had him probable. Like, there's a slight chance he might move on from him, but I don't think that's even real. I think that he's a guy that they like a lot in this locker room. They like a lot of what he provides on special teams and in the running back room. I just think there's a lot of reasons to like him on the team. I think Waldron might even be being kind of forced to create more of a role for him is rather than one of the backup tight ends. And maybe that comes to fruition. Maybe it doesn't. All depends how well it works,
Here's my galaxy brain moment, right? What if you just use Ian Wheeler as your fullback type? He still does all the special teams things that you would do with that fullback. And instead of using Kyrie Blasingame on the screen, like they did last week, you have a guy like him doing that screen.
Yeah, I don't know if he's the brick house as a blocker in space that Blasingame is, but I like the theory. I like the theory. And
like, I'm just trying to make it happen.
I've got to say, if I had it my way, like I was trying to predict here, not say what I think should happen. I would rather keep Ian Wheeler than Velus Jones.
Oh, yeah?
If I'm being honest. And I mean, I think Velus seems like a great guy. And clearly the Bears like his locker room presence, think he's a good guy to have in there. But when he dropped that kick return in the preseason,
yeah,
how many strikes does a guy get? Like honestly, I don't think that's something that gets better when the pressure goes up. And I think it's something that's going to cost you a game eventually. It's just how much you want to play with that fire.
And I think there's a lot of people that would agree with you on that. It is tough because there was a stretch in last year where every time you touch the ball, it was either a first down or a touchdown. It was like the first 4 weeks of the season. But that's what, 5 touches? Like, you need more.
Yeah. No, and I mean, if he figures out the fumbling issues, I will gladly eat crow. I will take my take down and be like, nope, he's awesome. I was wrong. Yeah. But it's just, I've seen him put the football on the ground so much. And the fact that it's, he is fighting for a roster spot and it happens again, that just terrifies me.
And I assume one would assume he's not playing tonight, correct?
I would think so. I mean, if I were running it, I'd want to see him on kick returns. I'd want to see him out there catching the football and make sure he's not fumbling it. Like in my mind, if he fumbles another kick return, he loses his spot. So I'd want to see him perform in that.
I would have, I agree. If it were me, I have no problem dressing you and saying, look, all you're doing is kick return tonight. Maybe I throw you in at gunner just to get you keep you warm and get some reps there. But I won't have you run the ball. I won't have you run any routes. Just return kicks today. Mm-hmm. I am curious though, because if you think about that first game when in the Hall of Fame game when they didn't play starters, he didn't play. So I wonder if for them he's going to fall into that category, unfortunately.
Well, and I think with the whole question of him and Wheeler fighting for a roster spot, ultimately I do think Ian Wheeler being a running back, a lot of teams have running backs they like on their practice squad and they can stash. I don't know how likely it is that a running back gets stolen.
Yeah.
And you might feel like if you're Ryan Poles, you might feel like it's pretty low risk to go with Velus, get Ian Wheeler on the practice squad and call him up whenever you need him if Velus isn't doing the job.
And then that is a very valid point. All right. Next category. Another one that we differed slightly. You can't read this because apparently I can't edit pictures well, but tight end. So Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett, Mercedes Lewis. That is easy. I stopped there and it was hard for me to do so. You kept Brendan Bates. I ended up cutting and not keeping another tight end just because there were other positions that I had for one, let's be real, for example, the Ian Wheeler one is a place where I could have gotten a tight end in there, but some other defensive ones as well were some spots where I just had a hard time keeping a fourth. How did you settle on Brendan Bates compared to some of the other tight ends on this roster, like Sweeney or other individuals from there? Carlson, for example.
Initially, I didn't have him on there, and I had 26 defenders and 24 offensive players, and I felt like I wanted that even. So I took away a defender. I was like, who is my final offensive player? That's why I got in the whole question of, well, how many running backs can I feasibly have on the roster? Ian Wheeler was one of the first guys I was looking at. Then I was looking at the receivers, and I was like, Dante Pettis and Simba Webster are redundant. Same way, like DeAndre Carter, he might be IR, maybe. I'm not quite sure because he has been injured all camp. If I'm Poles, I'm trying to keep him somehow, just as that insurance. But I end up thinking about, Gerald Everett doesn't really offer you much as a blocker.
No.
Cole Kmet goes down. You're sitting there saying we have Mercedes Lewis, a guy who's only a blocker, or Gerald Everett, a guy who's only a pass catcher.
Hey, Mercedes Lewis had a catch for a touchdown last year, sir.
Hey, I love it when Mercedes Lewis gets the football, but it just doesn't happen a whole lot.
No.
But so I'm sitting there going, Cole Kmet goes down. You'd really like a guy who can step in and be that traditional Y tight end who can do both. And maybe that's Brendan Bates. Maybe it's not. Like they had Steven Carlson, Tommy Sweeney on the roster. But Brendan Bates has had one of the best preseasons of any player in the league. He's one of the highest rated players on PFF. He's been graded high in his blocking, in his route running, his pass catching. He's been really showing out. And the cherry on top here, tight ends are going to be more valuable with the new kickoff rules. You need guys who can block. I don't think Mercedes Lewis is like maybe Mercedes Lewis is playing special teams. I've actually never looked at his snaps, but I'm not sure I want to rely on a 38-year-old as that special teams guy when I have a 23-year-old or however old Bates is, who's been showing out all camp as a guy who's hungry and can do it and has really earned a roster spot pretty well. I thought it was just a good spot to throw it to someone like him, and I thought the fit was just right there.
Yeah, like I said earlier, I really wanted a fourth tight end. And if it was going to be one, it was going to be Bates for pretty much every reason you said. He's a rookie, and the fact that he's able to do this as a rookie compared to, a Tommy Sweeney who's been around, a Steven Carlson who's been around, like there might be some more room for growth there that you don't necessarily know about quite yet. Compared to, do I necessarily think he's going to get snagged by another team and signed to a 53? Probably not. I'm okay with trying to push him onto a practice squad, which is why I felt okay moving him. So that, like you said, if a Cole Kmet does go down, I have at least someone I can call up there. But yeah, it was a numbers game for me. But yeah, if there was going to be someone, it would have been definitely Brendan Bates because, like you said, he's had a very, very good preseason. And honestly, tonight might be big for him to secure that spot, like you said.
Yeah, and ultimately, I think the final reason why for me, like why it made sense, was the kickoff rules.
Yeah.
The needing blockers on kick returns, and he is a guy who can provide you that.
All right. An area that's going to have a lot of change right now, probably, is going to be the offensive line. Q did it split up into interior versus tackle. We had the exact same four for interior: Tevin Jenkins, Coleman Shelton, Nate Davis, and Ryan Bates. I guess maybe someone, if they're going to question some individuals, like why aren't they making this team? You could ask about Bill Murray, and you could probably bring up, why am I blanking on his name right now? The other guard, Jatir Carter. There we go.
Yeah.
Why would one of those two not make this squad? But actually, let's just pull up the tackles too, because that kind of is part of it. Why wouldn't one of those two also make it? Because we had pretty much we had the exact same linemen make the team.
So, I mean, aside from the starters, the starting five, which we know, I mean, Ryan Bates is a lock to make this roster, right? He's going to be here. Important, valuable swing guy. And then Karan Amagaji, we just used a third-round pick on him. He's going to be on this roster as long as he's healthy. He just came off the NFI list, so he's going to be around and on the roster. You don't cut a third-round pick. It's that simple. And then behind that, you have Matt Pryor. Matt Pryor is probably your best backup after Ryan Bates, right? Like he's a guy who has had starting experience in this league. Has actually had some solid years as a starter in this league. Not over the hill. He's still in that nice age range. There's a lot of reasons to think that he's, a really strong backup here. And that brings you to 8 offensive linemen at this point. You're not keeping 10 most of the time. 9 is about as high as you go, typically. So then you're talking about who do you trust more between Larry Borom, Bill Murray, and Jatiri Carter? Borum's the most proven to me. Borum can offer you left-right versatility as a tackle and be, I mean, he's going to be underwhelming, but he's not going to die out there. You know, there are backup tackles in this league who will just die out there. Yeah. Like Khalil Mack will just put you in the dirt.
It's like you don't even exist.
Borum can manage better than those people can. So to me, that's pretty easy, because then you have, with Matt Pryor, he can play left, right, and inside at either guard spot. So you have that massive versatility there. So two guards go down and a tackle goes down, you still have the guys you need between Ryan Bates, Matt Pryor, and Larry Borom. I don't know that Bill Murray can handle that type of versatility. I don't think that Jatiri Carter can handle the offensive tackle in the NFL. That's where it breaks down to me.
Well, and Carter, right? I mean, he's always been guard and some snaps at center for the most part. He's been a good idea every time that, Bears fans, and I think there was a period of time where I'm like, hey, let's give Carter like a chance here. And then when he has gotten a chance, just haven't been impressed by it. It's just always been fine-ish, maybe.
Yeah, if some really nice flashes, but just all over the board consistency-wise.
Yeah.
And I'm at this point with him where it's like, if you're not there in year 3, when are you going to get there? And maybe he is, and the coaches are missing it. But from what we can tell from what the coaches are doing, or what the writing on the wall kind of is, they think he's kind of plateaued, is the way that I'm reading it, at least. He was great in the preseason last year. He's good in the preseason again this year. But they're like, I'm wondering if they've seen the improvement they want to, or if this roster's just improved too fast for him to keep up.
I mean, if you want to use last game as an example too, so some of your starters, Coleman Shelton, Braxton Jones, right? They played 22 snaps, 43% of the game. And then you even had like a Bill Murray, who we haven't talked about quite yet, but he played 21 snaps, 41%. And then you look at a Carter, he played 11 snaps. He played at best half of those other individuals. That's telling you like, hey, shoot, we got to get Carter some film, and so we can look at it. Let's get him in there. It's an afterthought. And when it comes to Murray, yes, he's flashed. Yes, Eberflus has called his name out. I'd be more likely to keep him, I think, based off what we've seen, than like a Carter. But, I mean, same thing kind of with him. He was a Patriots practice squad guy in the past. It's not like he is this this gem diamond in the rough that people is getting slept on. So he's a guy that you could, again, like he was on the Patriots, you could probably get him in your practice squad if you want to. And because you're hoping that, let's say for the sake of argument, Nate Davis goes down, you're throwing Ryan Bates in. If Tevin Jenkins in the same game goes down, you're putting in Matt Pryor, or trying to slide Larry Borom inside or something crazy like that. I mean, you have options with the flexibility you have from these tackles. Karan, I think he's going to make this team at this point in terms of just straight up being there. The only reason he wouldn't is if you threw him back on an NFI list or on some other list at this point, if his ramp up isn't going well. But as far as we can tell, the ramp up is going well. I did a whole little spiel on Twitter about where I thought he was. I'm not going to bore you all with the details of that quad tendon repair at this point, but he is on a good timeline. All this makes sense. And at this point in time, it makes sense that, he's not going to be some savior or anything like that, but he should be available come end of September, beginning of October if something happens.
To me, the best case with Amagaji is I don't want to say redshirt year, because I think some people can construe that as putting him on IR. And you probably know more about this than I do. If a player's on IR, can they practice? Can they put the pads on and actually get better at football? Or
no, you're just doing like rehab stuff, and you're doing drills with the training staff.
Yeah. So to me, the best case scenario is that he is on the roster all year, but doesn't play a snap. He has a huge learning curve ahead of him coming off a major injury. Yeah. Like it's a massive learning curve. So let him learn. Let him take his hard knocks in practice, no pun intended. And go up against Montez Sweat in practice. Go up against some of these guys, and go against the backups in the practice squad, where you can really master the craft, and then try to take those reps back to the starters, and then go master it again, and then take it back to the starters. And I think that is the way that Karan Amagaji really improves into being a guy who you can be comfortable starting in a year. I don't think it's throwing him into the fire of real live NFL snaps. And I don't think it's sitting him on IR. I think that is the best case scenario.
Gun to your head, who plays more snaps this year for the Bears? Tevin Jenkins or Nate Davis?
Tevin Jenkins.
Good. That is the right answer. That absolutely is the right answer.
It's a contract year. Guy wants to get paid. He's good. Like, I mean, there is a lot at stake for him. We look at what guys like Damian Lewis and I forget the guy from Miami. I can't think of his Robert Hunt just got paid by Carolina. What Kevin Dotson, Robert Hunt's former college teammate, that are two awesome guys in that draft from that Louisiana Raging Cajun team. They were just road graders, but that's for another time. Kevin Dotson just got paid by the Rams. Like, I feel like there's a bit of a resurgence going on right now in offensive line mentality of, we spent so long going towards the Shanahan wide zone, smaller, faster, more athletic blockers. And it seems to me like there's a resurgence for the maulers right now.
Bruisers inside, yeah.
Yeah. And that's what Tevin is. Tevin fits that. If he can play a full season, he is talking about life-changing money. Because also, you got to remember, it's a second-round pick. Like, it's a lot of money to me and you. But considering that you're putting the health of your back, your neck, and ultimately your brain on the line every single game out there, you need some life-changing money to do that. And Tevin has a chance to really get that massive payday right now.
Well, and he's also already taking a pay cut because he moved from tackle to guard. That was probably one of the biggest reasons why he didn't want to move, was because guards, you get paid overall less than tackles. And so at this point, right, I mean, you want to maximize what you can get as a guard. Just to give people an idea, right? So some of the top paid guards right now, you got Chris Lindstrom at 5 years, $102.5 million. Robert Hunt, as Q just mentioned, with signing a deal with Carolina this last year at 5 years, $100 million. You got Quinton Nelson's the fifth highest paid at 4 years, $80 million. For you, Q, let's say, as you said, Tevin plays more so than Nate Davis, and let's say through the bye week he has not missed a snap that he should miss. What would you be comfortable? That's the only information you have. Are you comfortable signing him to a long-term deal if you're the Bears? And if so, how much are you willing to pay him? Like, I mean, are you giving him Robert Hunt 5 year, $100 million money?
No, I'm not. Well, so I mean, it all depends. It depends on the guarantees to me. You know, how quickly can I? That's fair. If I'm being blunt and brutal, how quickly can I wash my hands of the player and say, well, that was fun, and move on? And with Tevin, I don't want to commit to over 2 years. And I think the Damian Lewis contract is actually a really nice comparison for what is realistic for Tevin. If based on the history that we know, and assuming he's going to play like, I don't know, 13, 14 plus games, I think, because his contract, it was 4 years, $13 million a year with the first 2 years guaranteed. I think that is a sweet spot for what makes sense for Tevin right now. If he plays 17 whole games, I think that has a chance to go up some. I don't think he has a chance to hit top of the market just because the availability has been such an issue. And that's something that really scares NFL teams.
Yeah, other teams know that.
Yeah. But ultimately, if I'm sitting there at week 9 and he hasn't missed a game, I'm not even really talking extension yet. I'm sitting here saying, I need 2 years from you, and I have a franchise tag that's probably about that $13 to $15 million range at a 1 year commitment. I'm okay waiting.
Maybe you start the conversations in week 9 and they just extend them out slowly as you start to get closer to the end of the year.
You say, well, we're getting there, but we still need to see, we want to see 17 games from Tevin. I think if the Bears see 17 games from him, they're happy coming up to his price, a realistic price on a contract that makes sense for both sides. Because I think Tevin and his agent also know his market is a little different than a Robert Hunt or a Damian Lewis, because he's missed a lot more time than they have.
Absolutely. Unfortunately, he has, but hopefully this year is different. All right, beautiful. That is the offense down. Quick break, and then we do the defense. All right, defense. We start with DBs. Little differences here. So we both have, obviously, Jalen Johnson, Tyreek Stevenson, Kyler Gordon, Josh Blackwell, and Terrell Smith. The difference really lies in you kept Jalen Jones. I kept Greg Stroman. I don't really know that there's too much of it. Some people might be surprised by Josh Blackwell, but I guess if you had to pitch Josh Blackwell, how would you do so?
He plays the nickel.
Yeah.
It's that easy. He's Kyler Gordon's backup. Not like Jalen Jones has played a little nickel. I don't think Greg Stroman can play the nickel. Josh Blackwell's value is the fact that he is a nickel corner, and if Kyler Gordon goes down, that is your guy. He is the only one of these guys who is a true second stringer to me, because I think Terrell Smith is second string on the outside, and he's making the roster as a fourth round pick, or maybe it was fifth, whichever. As a second year player who was drafted, I think he's a lock to make the roster.
Well, and he gives you some safety flexibility too.
Yeah. But so Blackwell is the only guy who is a second string player within the corner room outside of the starters and Terrell Smith.
Exactly. What made you go Jalen Jones over Greg Stroman?
Probably just the games that I've seen. I have more vivid memories of Jalen Jones' good plays than Greg Stroman's. They've both shown something in this league, and it's a really hard decision, really a toss-up between the two. I think Jones has a bit more versatility within his game, within his archetype, his athletic profile. I think Stroman has a more specific but more dominant skill set. Like, he has those super long arms. He's a bigger corner. He's more scheme specific, more like coverage specific, I guess I would say. Well, I think Jones has a more variety of styles that he can play.
My ultimate deciding factor was, it's kind of the same as you. Honestly, I just have more impressions in the back of my mind of Stroman, of, a pass breakup here, just like a nice defensive play there. If you go to PFF, it's actually kind of funny. They've both played. So Stroman's played 150 snaps last year, and then Jalen Jones played 148. So it's pretty damn similar. Greg Stroman's straight out slightly better by PFF at 66.6 versus Jalen Jones at 61.8. The ultimate decision is being made here is nothing that Q and I know about. It's the behind the scenes practice stuff. How are they in the classroom in a way? How are they in the locker room? Does Greg Stroman play some golf with Eberflus at some time? It's going to be something that we don't know. I mean, really, it was a coin toss. Some other names that I know some people might want on here, like I know I did, like Reddy Stewart. I wish there was more impression from him. Like, I like what I saw in college from him, and I liked the initial stuff I saw, but he kind of fell off for me.
Yeah, I think a guy like that, like him and Ro Torrance both, we've heard a little bit about, but I think they're guys that you might be able to get onto the practice squad. And I don't think either guy is going to challenge a Josh Blackwell, because I believe they're both nickel guys who can play the nickel well. And I don't think they're challenging Josh Blackwell. Although I just said I think you can get him in the practice squad. I do think nickel corner is one of the positions that is hard to hide guys at. Like, you think about the past, like think about like a Bryce Callahan. He was a guy who the Bears snagged as a UDFA, and he made the team and did really well. Or like who was Cravon LeBlanc? Bears stole him from the Patriots as a nickel corner. Nickel corner is a spot where I think there's a lot of teams gunning for guys because they often come out of nowhere.
N. White said, thoughts on Blackwell being the punt returner also. I mean, I kind of forgot about this, but that's also one of the reasons I ended up ultimately cutting Dante Pettis, was because if I can double dip and have my backup nickel, who I'm going to keep, potentially be my Rome Odunze sub for whatever reason, because he basically did what Dante Pettis did. He can catch the ball, and he actually returned the ball a little bit. So, yes, I agree that he can also potentially be that punt returner. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, Q.
Yeah, I'll be honest. I didn't realize that Blackwell was a punt returner, but I mean, he can do that. Great, all the better. That's gonna might give him the leg up over Jalen Jones. Ultimately, I'm thinking of corners, and maybe this is flawed, but I'm thinking of corners from what they're doing in the defense standpoint, and I think that's kind of where Eberflus probably stands, who has final say. I have a feeling Flus is probably much more about, what is he doing in the defensive secondary as opposed to what they're bringing as a punt returner just because he's a defensive guy.
I think that's a valid point. I could almost picture the meeting being like Flu's just like asking like, all right, so what is he going to do for us on defense? And then your special teams coordinator being like, well, but I do like what he does. And he's like, no, no, but what does he bring into the defense? Because that's just like how Flus is. I mean, I think you see that a little bit in Hard Knocks when you see how he talks even to Caleb Williams in some of those clips about like I want to know what you see, but like I want to know what you see in terms of like how this defense is being set up. He's a defensive guy. That's just how it is.
Yeah. And really, I'm speculating here, so this is not fact. I haven't sat down and watched the film and come to this conclusion, but I feel like based on their profiles, Stroman is probably more of a guy who, as long as you can limit his space to a smaller region, he can dominate that space. But Jones can be more flexible in a wider space. He might not be as dominant in that wider space, but he can cover more of it. And that gives you more opportunity to ultimately the Bears, their defensive philosophy is to squeeze space to force the football to their defenders, right? And so when you're taking away some of that space to cover for a guy who can't quite cover as much ground, that opens up more space that a guy like Kevin Byard has to cover rather than focusing on the football. And so that's where I land with Jalen Jones. Again, that's pure speculation, though. That's just based on the player profiles, their athletic profiles, and their size profiles.
No, I like that. Rounding out safety, or DB, excuse me, we have safety. So the big ones, Jaquan Brisker, Kevin Byard. Kevin Byard missed some practice earlier. First time he's really done so. He's really literally never missed a practice or a game. I mean, Iron Man. So hopefully this is not a trend for him. But let's say that something funky does happen. At this point, you're going to need backups. And that's really the difference here. I ended up keeping Elijah Hicks. We both did. Jonathan Owens, we both did. I also kept Quindle Johnson. You cut it right there. You kept it at 4 safeties.
At first, I did keep Quindle Johnson, just because I remember his draft profile and liking it, and thinking, he had, I thought he had, if I'm remembering correctly from his draft profile, he had a lot of versatility and a lot of things that he can add. And ultimately, I just think they're going to keep 4 safeties, not 5, but I want to keep 5. Like, I'm not even sure who I want the 5th to be. Like, at first, I wasn't even sure if I wanted Elijah Hicks on the roster, but the fact of the matter is he does too much on special teams to just be, to be thrown off like that. He is a valuable commodity on special teams, as much as I don't want to see him playing in the defense. And Jonathan Owens,
he graded out, by the way, 93rd out of 95 for safeties on PFF.
Yeah, I mean, that doesn't shock me, but he's still doing push-ups and making plays on special teams, and that's what he's here for. I'm cool with it. But between Quindle Johnson and Tarvarius Moore, I'm really interested in both guys. I'd love to see either of them make the roster. I just ended up thinking that, again, to the new kickoff rules, I think linebacker is going to be valuable. So you're going to see more linebackers get kept this year. With Tarvarius Moore, something that, like, when I saw his name, I was like, I know that name. Why do I know that name? And just today it hit me. He was a 3rd-round pick in 2018. He picked off Pat Mahomes in the Super Bowl in 2019. Then he ruptured his Achilles in 2021 and has only played 60 NFL snaps since. If I haven't watched the preseason that closely. I haven't heard his name at all during camp, really. But if he has shown, like, looked like he's back to the guy he was before the Achilles or close to it, I would not be at all surprised to see him make this roster. He was a very special athlete, coming out of college. But that ruptured Achilles, Mason, how much can that take away from your athleticism?
I mean, it saps you. I mean, if you want something that hits a little closer to home, I mean, just look at Tariq Cohen. He had the ACL tear initially and then fought back, was about to come back and make an NFL comeback. And then when he was training, he ruptured his Achilles, and that's all she wrote. I mean, yeah, he was on the Jets, training camp roster but he had to retire. He got cut and retired. That Achilles is super hard to come back from, especially depending on what your position is. So if your position is one where you need to either make a lot of quick movements, hence why Tariq had such a hard time with it, or I mean, it's the same thing with safety, right? You're dropping back into a zone and you got to make that one hard push cut and move up on a tight end that's coming at you or whatever the case might be. That's hella hard. So
Yeah.
I'm not surprised that he has only, hasn't played as much since tearing it, and that he has not had as much of that athleticism since tearing it. But if he has been able to find a little bit of the fountain of youth and, throw some Miracle Grow on that Achilles there, like you said, he had the profile originally where he was a dude.
Yeah. I mean, you pick off Pat Mahomes in the Super Bowl, I'm interested,
So you ended up in the next position, because this is kind of where I struggled. I almost didn't keep Quindell, but because of what you did here at linebacker, because I almost did the exact same thing, where TJ Edwards, Tremaine Edmonds, Jack Sanborn, we both kept Amon, which I'm not going to say the last name because I'm going to butcher the hell out of that.
Ogbongbemiga?
Maybe. I'll believe it.
I've heard it said that way.
Noah Sewell, and then you kept Micah Baskerville, the man who got an interception in one of the preseason games and actually returned it for 6. Actually, I almost went as far as cutting Noah Sewell. As much as I'm excited about Noah Sewell, he's been hurt and not available, and that's a problem for me. So I almost kept Micah Baskerville, getting rid of Sewell, and then I almost cut Quindell, keeping Micah, for the same reasons I'm sure you're about to go into. But why did you end up keeping Micah Baskerville?
He's been playing on kick return or kickoff. I'm sorry, kick coverage. And again, if it's more of running plays, you need guys who can stack, shed, and tackle. I'm not even sure that he can stack, shed, and tackle, but against tight ends, I think he can. If we're saying tight ends are going to be more prevalent on the kick return side and linebackers more prevalent on the kickoff side, I think he can shed tight ends and go make plays. And I just think Baskerville is one of Eberflus's guys. I just get that vibe for some reason that he's like, he is going to make this team eventually. If it's not this year, it'll be next year or the year after. Like he is, I just get the vibe that he is an instinctive linebacker that Eberflus wants to be around all the time and just talk ball with and like teach all his linebacking ways. And I that's really what it comes down to for me with Baskerville. He's a little lighter than the typical Eberflus linebacker, and not long either.
6 foot,
but very instinctive football player. And I think that's gonna work his way as long as he's contributing on the kickoff stuff, which I think he can really carve out a role for. I was also considering Carl Jones Jr. here, which I haven't paid that much attention to Carl Jones Jr. in the preseason games. He hasn't flashed that much to me either, but he's grading out fine in PFF. He's playing a good amount of special team snaps, and he had the second largest UDFA signing bonus of any Bears UDFA this year. He has a dead cap hit of 120,000.
That's crazy.
Yeah, so right? I mean, that is money. Like that is an amount of money that takes away from your cap if you cut him, which has to be a consideration here. The largest dead cap hit they had was Benedict, who's going to be on IR, so they're not going to eat that. But Carl Jones Jr., 120,000 dead cap with him. Again, it's 120,000 out of what, like 180 million or something. But it still matters. It all matters because whatever you save rolls forward to the next year. You do that every year for like 5 years. You're talking about one minimum vet contract or something.
That's exactly. It still matters. So it'll be interesting to see ultimately, what does he get much run tonight? What does that look like? Does that help him? Or is it just really the Micah Baskerville show in terms of that last spot that might be there? Obviously, you just mentioned how he's a little smaller, but one could argue that actually might be useful when it comes to this kick coverage, or even because of that slipperiness you're going to have instead of being a little more lumbery at maybe more of a 230, 240. I was so close to putting on the team, it just didn't happen.
Oh wait, here we go. I didn't see Carl Jones Jr.'s draft profile earlier, but I must have just missed it and I was flying through stuff. But so he's 5'11", 219.
Jeez. Okay.
That's interesting.
Barely a linebacker.
I think he might be another blitz backer. I'm not completely sure. big motor guy, according to Lance Zierlein's report. But I won't sit here and read it for you. You can go find it if you want to.
I mean, it's interesting. I mean, he played 16 snaps on defense. He played 10 on special teams, so 43%. So they were really giving him some decent snaps. I mean, the defensive ones matched guys like pretty much like a Tremaine Edmonds, TJ Edwards. They both played 12 snaps. Didn't obviously play as many as some of the other guys who are more in the 20s, like a Hardy. I mean, and technically, but I mean, he was up in the 26s. So it might be a sleeper thing where he actually has a chance here. We'll end up seeing.
You know what? They're the same. They're both the same kind of profile as Amen Agbang Bamiga. There's something going because they are not Amen, Baskerville, and Jones are not Eberflus linebackers, like historically.
It's interesting that he has 3 of those kinds of guys, though.
Right? Yeah, like I mean, Baskerville's been here, so like I would even say like. You know, Baskerville has been a developmental project, whatever, but Jones and Agbang Bamiga, they're either for the new kickoff rule or they have a idea for a blitz backer that is something new in the defense. One of those two things. I would assume it's probably the kick coverage more than anything. But
and if you're going to end up deciding between an Amon who has been kind of around the league, might be tapped out in terms of ultimately who he is, and a guy in Jones who, right, rookie, but also, like you said, in terms of that signing bonus, does that ultimately shift your hand, and does a Carl Jones make the roster instead of an Amon?
Maybe. I mean, I would assume Amon has some dead cap associated with him as well, but I was thinking more if it comes down to Baskerville and Amon. I think there could be something there, but I haven't watched Carl Jones that close to say he's going to unseat a veteran free agent signing.
I have not either. All right, moving on. We have our interior defensive line. A place where it was hard, but also just because there's not a lot of depth here. At least, you have your obvious, you have your Andrew Billings, who signed that extension last year and was everything that you could have wanted out of a massive man and what he did. Then you have your 2 draft picks from the same class, and a Trevon Dexter and a Zach Pickens, who you're hoping to see some steps from, especially Dexter. I kept also Byron Cowart, just because you don't really have someone else. You need someone else. I'm not.
Just because it's him or Michael Dwumfor, and Byron Cowart had a forced fumble, so his PFF grade looks really nice.
I'm with you. Guys, I was hoping Keith Randolph would jump off a little more, right? University of Illinois product, but haven't really heard or seen much out of him.
I mean, I watched a fair amount of his tape, watching Johnny Newton's tape, so I ended up watching a lot of Keith Randolph. I was rooting for the guy. I didn't see a lot that really, like even in college, I was a little lower on his profile as like what is coming for this guy. And I don't think this is the defense that he really fits in. I think his best chance is a 3-4 D end. So.
And that totally makes sense. Another guy who I was rooting for to make more of an impact, but didn't, Deshaun Mallory, local product. I mean, he is a guy who you usually love those stories. It was awesome, but again, just hasn't really flashed. So just, if you're going to go with someone at this point, I wouldn't be surprised if like you keep Cowart, but he's a placeholder for a cut from another team and you end up bringing that person in.
We're in line. I was going to say, I think the 4th guy is Byron Cowart or whoever they find to replace Byron Cowart. Like, I don't think that there's really another option here. I wish that Jalen Hutchings had gotten signed earlier. He was coming off a injury, because I look at all the backups here, and physically, Jalen Hutchings has the tools to play in this league that some of these other guys I don't think quite have. Like he has the mass, he has the power, he has the twitchiness.
His step is nuts.
Yeah, he's quick. He played running back in high school. Like, and I went to Texas Tech. I'm very biased when it comes to Jalen Hutchings. He was a fan favorite, but I do think he has some tools that you can work with in the league that some of the other guys who are fighting for that final spot don't quite have. It's just a question of where he is coming back from that injury. And I haven't heard his name since they signed him, so I don't even know how much he's been practicing.
Yeah, exactly.
But I do love him as a practice squad stash, because I do think there's something there with him.
I think that's the perfect thing for him, just is that practice squad stash. And lastly, we have edge. Montez Sweat, DeMarcus Walker. Daniel Hardy to me, I don't know about you, but I think that's more of a at this point a lock than a question, just in terms of how he's playing. Austin Booker, and then where we really differed here ultimately was you kept Jacob Martin, I kept Dominic Robinson. My issue with Jacob Martin is he's hurt and he hasn't done anything because he's been hurt. And um, if he hadn't been, I think for me it would have been I would have been more likely to keep him.
Yeah, I thought I kept Dom Rob. I must have made that shit. Like I clearly didn't. When I first did this, I had them keeping Dom Rob, and Khalid Kareem and Jacob Martin, and I was like, that's just too many guys because you had to make a decision between those three, right? I know Eberflus really likes Khalid Kareem because he's a pterodactyl with good power. I'm not sure he's that good on the football field, but like he has the Montez Sweat ish strength, length profile that this defense really craves. But ultimately, I figured it's between Dom Rob and Jacob Martin, free agent signing and draft pick. And I went with Jacob Martin just because we haven't seen it from Dom Rob. Like 2 years in, he might have been one of the worst edge defenders in the NFL last year. So, I mean, a guy completely changes his body to be a DeMarcus Walker type player now, where he can play inside a little and outside on rushing downs. Maybe there's something more there. I think you can probably figure it out in the practice squad in your third year in the league, because I don't know who's saying, well, we're going to go get that guy who just completely changed his body because we liked his athletic profile 3 years ago when he was half wide receiver, half edge rusher.
Both fortunately and unfortunately, I think that could be said of right now with Jacob Martin too, for a different reason. Just because, like, let's say you did let him go, is another team going to sign him when he just hasn't been available for the last month plus?
Yeah.
So I think both could potentially end up going like being practice squaddy guys. I mentally said, and this is probably not the way you should handle this, but I said I'm ignoring the last two, his previous years for Dominique Robinson, and I'm saying with this body change, what have you done? And the power and the speed that he was able to produce in the last couple of games and the flashes he had, I was like, oh, okay, like that. There's something there. And I said this earlier. I'm pretty sure if he had been healthy, I would be saying Jacob Martin here would have cut Dominic Robinson and moved on. But I just haven't seen anything that, because he hasn't been there. So I wasn't able to put him there. I would not be surprised if he's kept. Or if you just want to go with Kareem, because again, at least he fits the profile you want and he'll be in the right spot.
Yeah, just a known commodity. I mean, ultimately, I didn't realize how little Jacob Martin had actually practiced or played in anything. He almost sounds to me like he might be on IR, and that gives Dom Rob the roster spot, and then you can make that decision when you need to.
Yeah, that's where in our little sheet that you made, I threw the IR there, because I think, yes, you just say, look, take some time, get your body right, and we'll make some decisions and cuts when we need to.
Yeah. Now, there was one other edge rusher who's also interesting. The largest UDFA signing bonus. So second largest was the linebacker Carl Jones, or I'm sorry, third largest was Theo Bennett. Second largest was Carl Jones. Largest was a guy who we've seen nothing from, Jamri Chroma, edge rusher, $200,000 dead cap hit. I mean, he's going to be on IR because he's been coming back from like an injury. I think he's on NFI right now from a finger injury. But I just wanted to mention him because they gave the guy 200,000 guaranteed, like, signing bonus. They got to think there's something there. So I'm interested to see what they think is there.
I think physical profile wise, I mean, he seems like a Flus guy, right? I mean, like 6'3", 271 out of James Madison, hence why obviously he was an undrafted free agent.
He was
just a guy that he had pretty good production while he was there. He spent 4 seasons. He's an older guy, but just a super muscular dude, long arms, great frame. Like, but at the end of the day, right, if I remember correctly, because I kind of tried looking him up when the Bears ended up signing him, his fits sometimes weren't great and wasn't quite athletic enough at the edge to fight off some of these really athletic tackles. But he profiles out. He's interesting though, and like you said, would be pretty easy to throw on, NFI, because if you're on the NFI list, when cuts happen, you miss the first 4 weeks, and then before you can come back. So that would be enough time for him to hopefully heal up with that finger, and then again make some decisions, whether that's practice squad or if I can't imagine here whether it's a Dominic Robinson or if it's a Jacob Martin that you're saying, okay, we're going to bring in Chroma, but interesting guy.
Yeah, interesting. And he played at Rutgers before he transferred to James Madison. That's what it was. So he was a Power 5 guy there at one point. I just wanted to mention him. I don't think he's taking a roster spot from whether it be Jacob Martin or Dom Rob. I just was interested by the signing bonus.
One thing I did not have up here for space wise and reasons because there's no point. Special teams players such as Cairo Santos, Torrey Taylor, and Patrick Scales. They're all making the team. End of story. Move on.
Corliss Waitman's taking that job, brother.
Which actually, Corliss Waitman, if you didn't have Torrey Taylor, he's actually punted well in this preseason. Like, I'm not going to sit here and say like I'm a punt expert, but he's looked good. So I think he'll be fine. He's going to get signed by some team because he looks solid.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think he's shown enough to get signed somewhere, especially, punter injuries do happen. Someone goes down, someone will grab Corliss Waitman quick.
Quick answer, MJ50. You think Doug Kramer will make it? No shot.
Yeah, I mean, local kid, you root for him, but I'm just not sure it's in the cards that he's gonna be a NFL player making the roster at the end of cuts.
All right. Almost done. Then we're going to get out of here. Final preseason game against the Kansas City Chiefs tonight. The quest for 4-0. If you had to pick your top 3 players that you felt needed an impactful final game to make this team for the Bears, who would your 3 be?
Ian Wheeler hits a home run, goes a long way for him. I think that if Ian Wheeler can put an exclamation point on this preseason in camp, he has a real shot to make this roster. Then I would say, let me sort this by my bubble players. A guy like Tarvarius Moore. I think Tarvarius Moore, if he can go out there, like he's not your typical guy that you'd say in this, but a guy coming back from injury, if he makes a wow play here or there, you could start to feel like you just got a very talented football player for free. And then behind that, I mean, I'm not sure. It's got to be a wide receiver. I think.
I was gonna say there's like 3 wide receivers you could throw in there and say
one of the punt, like, so Ian Wheeler is kind of a punt return guy too, but like Dante Pettis and Nasimba Webster, and I don't know if DeAndre Carter's even going to play. I'm not sure if he's on IR or what is all kind of happening there, but I think one of the wide receivers can differentiate themselves. That can go a long way between Webster and Pettis.
Yeah, I mean, you can throw my 3 would have been 1, Ian Wheeler, 2. I don't even know if he's playing tonight or not because he got hurt after that first game. But Colin Johnson, obviously, he was the big name. Whether you talk about Hard Knocks, out of the game, he had a big hit in that game too. So he did have some special teams. You could say like, all right, cool, like he can cover. He needs to play, and he needs to show that he can beat out the Dante Pettis, Nasimba Webster, DeAndre Carter grouping there. So I mean that could be a big one if he's playing. And then I think you can dip down into that O line. I was going to say only 3. I'm going to move out of O line. I'm going to go Brandon Bates. I'm going to say tight end there because I do think he needs to show out there to lock that spot in because like you're talking about body type wise, you're probably looking for, I need a linebacker-ish, tight end-ish, or like a safety that can play big.
Mm-hmm.
Can he play enough on special teams and can he produce a little bit on offense if a Cole Kmet went down that he could slide in and be that dual role there? So that'll be my 3.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Brandon Bates was a guy who was on my mind, as was Carl Jones in there. Of like, I don't think Baskerville can make a large impression either way. Like, I think if he does great, if he does poorly, I think his chances stay pretty similar because they know what they have in him. But I think a guy like Bates or Carl Jones can really make them rethink something too. If they already had a preconceived notion, they don't know those guys that well either.
All right. That's all we got. Q, I can't thank you enough for popping in here. If people are not following you, reading your content, listening to your content, which is stupid, they should be, where would they find that? And do you have anything cool coming up soon?
So you can find my writing over at ontapsportsnet.com, where we do all Chicago sports. We've got a whole bunch of writers over there doing good content. And then for podcasting, you can find me doing Bears content for the Bears on Tap podcast, which you can find on any podcasting platform that's out there, just Bears on Tap. Or if you're looking for more NFL content and specifically gambling content, I do a weekly show called Shaving Points Podcast with a Cowboys fan. So just be aware you're going to get some Cowboys talk in there, but you're going to get all NFL talk. We're going to talk Bears. We're going to talk every team in the NFL every week. That is the Shaving Points Podcast, also available everywhere you can find podcasts or over at shaving-points.com.
Yeah, y'all can get super excited about the Cowboys over-unders on rushing yards with Rico Dowdle and Ezekiel Elliott just doing the best they can.
Don't be afraid to draft Zeke Elliott in your fantasy draft. Just do it. When you are in that range, just do it. He's going to get touches. He's going to get touchdowns.
I think he's going to be a touchdown merchant on the goal line.
Yep. Rico Dowdle isn't going to take that ball from him that often. Like they got to share, but don't be afraid of Zeke in fantasy.
There you go. You got a little fantasy nugget too. Bare Bones is bringing it all to you. All right, that's it. Hopefully y'all enjoy tonight's game. If you're watching, if you're not, I don't blame you. It's a preseason game where no starters are playing. I will watch because I suck. That's just what I do. I just am going to watch this and I'll take way too big of takes and pine after certain players. Oh, one more question for you. I meant to ask this. Have you been watching? The two-part question. Have you been watching Hard Knocks?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If someone is shown on Hard Knocks getting cut, who will that be?
Nate Davis, because they're not going to show someone getting cut.
Good answer. All right, that's all we got. Enjoy tonight. Enjoy the weekend. Real football is just around the corner, and it'll be very exciting. As a reminder, Bare Bones will still be doing its Thursday previews, looking at the game ahead. But then also now I will be doing the post-game show. So that'll be very helpful, especially knock on wood, my wooden table here. If there's an injury, I can talk about that right away instead of y'all having to wait to hear what's going on with those, but also the hot takes about the hopefully plentiful wins that are coming your way. Bear the hell down, everybody.
Bear down.